is Samuel Kochomai, and this is communication research. The code is BJL3201. And today we are talking about measurement in research. And when we talk about measurement in research, we will consider a number of measurement elements. And one of the measurement elements is variables. And so, what are variables? Variables are logical groupings of attributes. And basically, attributes are characteristics of persons or things. And therefore, if you want to, go further, you could say, therefore, that a variable refers to a measurable characteristic that assumes different values among subjects. And in social science, we rarely use the word subjects, we use respondents or participants. An example of a variable is that of sex, elsewhere referred to as gender, which is made of two attributes, the attribute of male and female. So if you talk about variables of gender, you have male and female. And so it's very important when we begin to talk about variables to first and foremost settle the idea of variables within social and physical sciences, or what is referred to as pure sciences. So in social and physical sciences, we are saying that researchers have developed measures such as time, volume, length, age, sex, blood pressure, etc. And, you can name them. But there are other variables in all fields, particularly in social science and other areas, where standard measures do not exist. So what happens in those situations? Of course, the researcher must develop some of the variables. Let me give you an example of some of the variables that do not have standard measures like temperature and so forth. Sadness. What is the sadometer or something like that to measure sadness? That doesn't exist. Happiness, religiosity, satisfaction, because all these concepts sometimes are relative. The experience of one person when happy and the other may be different altogether. So those are some of an example or some of the examples of variables that do not have standard measures. And therefore, like I said, researchers therefore develop some measures or scales to measure some of these variables. And we're saying it differs now because they are not standard. Each researcher develops his or her own measures to try to measure some of those variables that do not have standard measures. So now, there are various types of variables. The first one, and which is very important variable in research, is the independent variable, also known as the predictor variable. And this kind of variable is the one that the researcher manipulates to see the effect of that variable or a measurable attribute in the other. And if you have had researches like the effect of these on these, that already is giving you indication of the independent variable and the dependent variable. So independent variable can be divided again further into two types, what's called measurable, rather experimental and measurement types. Let's look at these two independent variables clearly. Experimental type are those variables that a researcher manipulates, that has manipulative control. That means the researcher can manipulate the variable. So but it's very common in biological and physical sciences. They may not be quite popularly used in, social and social sciences. So the measurement one constitute variables or phenomena that have already occurred and have fixed manipulative and uninfluenceable properties. Examples of these, like you cannot manipulate age, it has already occurred. You cannot manipulate gender. You cannot manipulate marital status. Why? Because all these variables are either environmental or personological. Okay, so these are measurement type of variables. So types of independent variables, the type of independent variables. So that's independent variable, the variable that the researcher controls to see how, or rather manipulates to see the effect of that manipulation on another variable, which is referred to as dependent variable, also known as criterion variable. Now, these variable or variables are the ones that serve the consequence of the independent variable or the manipulation of independent variable. So it attempts to indicate total influence arising from the effects of independent variables. And so we could say simply that dependent variable varies as a function of independent variable. That what happens to it is as a result of what happened to independent variable. And so dependent variables usually occur as outcome, as effects, as consequence, and so forth. So if you read a research or a title with effect, with consequences, with outcome, obviously it should occur to you that those are independent variables being examined. Further, are these other types of variables. But let me note that those two variables are quite fundamental, and all these others either come either to interfere with them or change it to alter the relationship between the two variables, the independent and the dependent variable. Now let's look at control variables, also referred to as moderating variables. These are variables held constant in an effort to identify independent variable. Okay, what does that mean? This means if a researcher is aware that certain variable is likely to influence the results, he or she should control the variable in that study. And the control process ensures that what effects comes out is not or does not include the effect by the moderating variable, or rather the control variable. Further, variables which influence the results of a study, if not controlled, are referred to as extraneous variable. That the results have come out, but you did not control. You did not control what you did not control. Moderating variable, so they turn and become extraneous variable. And so introduction of control variables increases validity of data. In reality, absolute control of extraneous variable is not possible in any study, because you cannot perfectly identify all other moderating variables. They may be here or there, but when you note, then you control them. So those are control variables. Intervening variable. This variable comes between independent and dependent variable in a chain of causation. So intervening variable is caused by independent variable, and the intervening variable is determinant of dependent variable. It comes in between. Okay, so independent variable is supposed to cause effect on this, but there is an intervening what? Variable. And this intervening variable can either exacerbate the effect or undermine what? The effect. In other words, you're saying if you are going to collect your data, analyze and produce findings, if you have not done something with this, then your findings may not accurately represent the phenomenon or the situation you are studying. And then antecedent variables. An antecedent variable comes before independent variable. An antecedent variable does not interfere with the established relationship. You know, it is outside the relationship between the two variables here. So it does not interfere because already these two had related. So it just clarifies the influence that precedes the relationship between independent and dependent variable. So those are some of the types of variables we can discuss today. Now, what type of relationships exist, you know, between or among variables? There are three types of relationships that may occur when variables interact. One could be positive relationship, it could be negative relationship, it could be curvilinear relationship. In positive relationship, it means high value on one variable is associated with high value on another. It just says, for example, assuming you want to establish whether, you know, love among couples will increase with gift giving. So you are saying if these couples exchange more gifts and then their relationship improves, then you are saying the relationship between the gifts and the effect of these gifts on their relationship will be positive, because the more gifts they gave each other, the more they become, the relationship improved or increased, for that matter. So that would be, you know, positive relationship. The inverse relationship is where low value on one variable is associated with high value of another variable, and vice versa. Now, if we use that example, maybe you say gifts are going to improve, or rather, yeah, increase their relationship. So you realize that the more gifts were given, the more the relationship decreased. That is what? Negative relationship, which is inverse. And then you come to curvilinear. Nature of the relationship changes at certain levels of the variables. Okay, but let me just use my example. You realize, your study may find that those gift giving works up to certain point, but beyond that, exceeding that point, then the relationship again comes down. So that is the curvilinear relationship. So those are the 2 or 3 types of relationship that come when, you know, variables interact. Let's look at these important concepts, because they are going to be helpful as we move forward. We are going to explore the 2 concepts, conceptualization as well as operationalization. Let's begin with conceptualization, but that word comes from, the root word is the concept, and concept basically refers to mental constructs or images developed to symbolize persons, things, events. Now, to understand the symbolism of ideas and so forth, you can read a theory called symbolic interactionism. It's a communication theory. is also a theory in other social sciences. So you could also say concept is an organized principle used to differentiate classes of phenomena with common characteristics from that class of phenomena. So then what is conceptualization? The simplest way to refer to conceptualization is therefore to refer to it as the process of specifying what we mean by a particular term. In other words, you define that term clearly, to be specific enough so that others know what you mean. And in research, in research, you have to define your terms so that the meaning that you gave those particular terms are the meanings that your readers, the people reading your research, will put. Otherwise, rather than them trying to think what you meant by this term and this term. An example: if we hypothesize that the lower social status in college students directly correlates to an increase in political behavior, then what exactly is political behavior? See, we want to conceptualize what political behavior is. So if you have to do a study to see if there is a direct link between social status of parents and deviant behavior in college students, to do this you must first state what you mean by social status. So we'll move on and look at, there's a diagram I'm going to explain later here, but let me begin with the explanation for operationalization. Also, that word comes from the word operation, and in research, an operation is a procedure for identifying or indicating the value of cases on a variable. So from there we can say operationalization therefore is the process of specifying the operations that will indicate the value of cases on a variable. So we're saying conceptualization is step one. Further than conceptualization becomes what? Operationalization, making that concept measurable. So you have defined what the concept is, and then now operation means now you want to make it measurable, and we'll see it in a short while. So, operational is the process of developing operational definitions. Operational definitions refer to concrete and specific definition in terms of operations by which observations are going to be made, which is, I said simply, you want to turn that concept into a measurable concept. For example, the operational definition of earning an A for this course is getting an aggregate score of at least 70% of the continuous assessment test and the final exam. So getting an A has been operationalized. So if they ask you, how many did you get A in this unit? If you didn't get 70, obviously, no. So those are the two concepts: operation, operationalization, concept, and conceptualization. Now let's continue with our examples of these concepts. Let's say we were to operationalize the effect of giving gifts to a spouse as a method of strengthening a relationship. How will we measure the relationship of a spouse? How? Now we have to operationalize. And this is now operationalization, because what we are measuring what is what? Strengthening relationship. How do we measure? Provide operations. Operation number one, we look at increased intimacy. How do you do that? You operational as the number of intimacy messages. So you might ask your research, your audience, your respondents, how many increased intimacy? How many intimate messages did you get from your spouse this week? 7, 5 to whatever. You have already measured intimacy. Then you come to reduced conflict. as number of conflicts in a week or a month or whatever. And then the operation will also increase support, operation as responses to help sort. So that's how to operationalize. Now you see you've made these measurable. You have made eventually when you bring all this together, then you can say whether the relationship was strengthened or not. Now this is the diagram that describes operationalization and conceptualization. So conceptualization is saying what is social status? Social status is indicated by power, it's indicated by prestige and privilege. Now I chose to look at prestige alone, because you could also look at as a way of doing our example. So how do you measure prestige? You look at the possessions, you look at the fashion, jewelry, self-report, and all other things to measure prestige. That's prestige. You could also do something for privilege. You could also do something for, and you can have a series of questions for your questionnaire on that. So step number 1 is conceptualization. Step number 2 becomes the operation. You have turned these into measurable items. Moving forward, so we have looked at those two concepts in relation to variables and those two, conceptualization and operation in relation to variables, because these are the variables you are attempting to measure. Now let's move on and look at levels of measurement. And levels of measurement are simply the mathematical precision with which the values of a variable can be expressed. And levels of measurement can be classified into two levels: qualitative level and then quantitative level. Now, we'll see later on the four levels. Level 1 is nominal. That is name, from the word name. The nominal level of measurement has no mathematical interpretation. Okay? So that's nominal. Then we come to quantitative levels of measurement. This is from ordinal, interval, and ratios. These are progressively more precise mathematically. We'll see in some example in a short while. So when we know variables levels of measurements, then it's easy for us. We can better understand how cases vary at each variable. And so we can understand fully what we are intending to measure. So the levels of measurement can't be determined without considering both the concept and the conceptual. You recall, the diagram we just drew. So let's begin with these 4 levels of measurement. Level 1 is nominal, level 2 is ordinal, level 3 is interval, and level 4 is ratio. Let's begin with nominal measures, where we have our examples. Nominal measures identify the nominal variables whose values have no mathematical interpretation. They vary in kind or quality, but not in amount. For example, okay, let me share the characteristics. They are categorical, qualitative, or nominal. Vary in kind and not amount. They are attributes instead of values. They are mutually exclusive and exhaustive. Example, you may have answered a questionnaire, but if a questionnaire, for example, asks you about your political affiliation, which party do you ascribe to? If the answers are Jubilee Party, ODM, or which political coalition do you belong? NASA, Third Way Alliance, or agenda? Religion is also another. All these do not have mathematical interpretation or values. because they are nominal. So if you have answered a question that talks about religion, parties, those are nominal. It's nominal level. It does not have mathematical interpretation. Then we come to ordinal, which is progressively the progressive ones that have mathematical interpretation precisely. This is the less precise among the three, but ratio is the most precise. Now let's look at it. Ordinal measures specify only the order of cases, ordinal for order, order of cases, which one is higher, which one is for example, which was greater than, less than, and so forth. However, the distance between the two cases cannot be determined. So you're asked to respond to a question that are frequencies. How many times do you go for holidays in a year? Then they give you the choices: once a year, once a month, once a week. Now, once a year means which month do you go? Does it mean December, June, January? See, that's where we and then once a month. Which day in the month? So that's why we call them ordinal. They are in classified in some order. But then we come to interval measures. An interval measure, at this level, numbers represent fixed measurement units, but they do not have absolute zero. An example: temperature measurement. If you say it's 0 degrees Celsius, does it mean there is no temperature? Yeah, you're measuring temperature, but you say it's 0 degrees Celsius. Does it mean there is no temperature? It doesn't mean there is no temperature. So basically, that's important to note. So it has no absolute zero, but they represent fixed numbers. Lastly, the ratio, which is the most precise level of measurement. A ratio level of measurement represent fixed measuring units with absolute zero. What examples do you have? Let me say, if you, for example, you respond to a questionnaire which has demographic questions, telling you how many children do you have? Either one or none. So that's why we call it the highest, because it has absolute zero. Ratio numbers can be added, subtracted, divided, multiplied, all manner of things you can do with it. We talk about age, income, number of kids, and so forth. So I think I've delivered on that, levels of measurement. Now let's go further, and this is actually an application of operationalization, the logic of scaling. And I'm going to spend a little time on this, because certainly I think it's simpler part of this discussion. So scaling is the practical application of conceptualization. In other words, it gives complex issues, multiple measures leading to a single conclusion is often required. So let's come and say rationale for scaling, need for multiple indicators, statistical analysis. All these require measurement variation. So given the complex attitude measures, tendencies and patterns become more easily discerned through multiple indicators. So like earlier, we were measuring the strength of a relationship using three concepts. So that becomes a scale. So let's see the difference of these scales and indexes. Composite multiple measures about a particular aspect of theoretical concept. These are generally measures of your independent variables. For the index, composite measure of multiple dimensions of particular theoretical concepts is generally a measure of your dependent what? variables. When we talk about scales and indexes, that's what they represent. So types of scales, the common ones that are used by researchers is, I don't know, others called Likert, others called Likert scale. And Likert scale provides independent responses and reasonable variance within response sets. And I think, you know, many of us have responded to a Likert scale kind of, you know, measure or respond to a questionnaire that have used Likert or Likert scales. And these scales have 4 to 9 point interval measure. Okay, sometimes from strongly disagree to strongly agree. You know, can also respond with never through always. So all that are you know, about the Likert scale. So simply put, if you have responded to a questionnaire with such kind of question, simply put, we're saying you have used, or rather responded to a Likert scale kind of a questionnaire. Questions with simple answers like yes or no, all of them also constitute the Likert or Likert scale. Yeah, there are arguments about matters, what you label one and what you label last in your continuum of responses in Likert scale. Sometimes scholars say it can alter the way, you know, respondent answer your questions or not, but that's a debate that, you know, it has been argued for some time, but it makes sense. But it also requires or dependent on individuals. They cannot be. So the cure for that is to consult the literature. What is the current literature saying in regard to, in as far as, you know, deciding whether to start with strongly agree or strongly disagree, or use the medium, whatever, like not applicable or don't know, you know, all that. So the second common scale is Bogadar's social distance scale. This is meant to examine the degree of strength of an attitude or an opinion. So what is the procedure for this? You pass through a logical sequence of distance to bring respondent closer to his or her through inference. Can be dichotomous sets like yes or no, or a Likert type scales response sets such as strongly agree, and so. But there are distances between. Okay, on one end you have these, on the other, but you create some 6, 7, or 5, or 4 for your respondent to choose. That's an example. How do male war journalists feel about female war journalists? And you instruct your respondent, respond using the following answers: strongly agree, agree, haven't thought about it, disagree, strongly disagree. But you remember there is a, so you respond to this, all of them. So question, I believe that women have place in war journalism. So if you strongly agree, you do that, and all that, you indicate the number as you move on. So there's an example for Bogadar's social distance scale. So on the other hand, indices, the index, summarizes specific observations into a representative general usable entity. Because dichotomy response like do not, like yes or no, sometimes can't help much. So you use, you know, indexes, and we said indexes are for actually measuring the dependent variable. Example, how do you determine whether or not someone is criminal? What does that require you to do? First, you must create an operational definition, standardize the indexes. You can use, there are those who, the existing ones, like were created by psychologists and others, and communication scholars. Elliott and Adjeton is one. So scales and indexes obviously are complex measures, and they are good for research, especially in the social science. So Bogata scales are good at measuring attitudes concerning classes of people or things. So in measurement, we have looked at scales, we have looked at variables, we have looked at conceptualization and operational. Further, in another element of measurement, let's look at reliability and validity. Reliability and validity. These are very important measurement concepts in research. So what is reliability and what is it about? Reliability refers to the extent to which a measuring procedure yields the same results over and over again. In other words, on repeated trials. In short, it refers to the degree to which a test consistently measures what it is meant to measure. So that is, so you see, reliability talks much about the measurement procedure. And so we observe that reliability is important in research as it makes possible replication of research by independent observers. So the reason why a tool should be reliable, because somebody else can use it to collect data and do analysis and produce findings and observations. And a reliable tool or procedure or measure is very important in generalizing the findings. And generalizing the findings means applying the findings to the population that from which the data was obtained. Then validity, on the other hand, refers to accuracy. That's in a simple English. But in research, it refers to the degree to which a test measures what is supposed to measure. So validity, as opposed to reliability, which is about the procedure, this is concerned about the tool as well as the data obtained. So with regard to research instrument, which is the tool, a measurement device is considered valid if it really measures what's supposed to measure, and that's according to Newman 2010. And so I want to observe that today we have looked at measurement in research, and we said the measurement procedure requires a number of things. But let me begin by saying in measurement, we've discussed a number of elements. Element 1, variables. Element 2, we have looked at key concepts of conceptualization and operationalization. We have also looked at, we've also looked at the levels of measurement, which has mathematical precision, which one does not have mathematical precision, and eventually we looked at two very important concepts in measurement research, which is validity and reliability. So on that note, thank you very much that we have covered this much today. Thank you.